To order this work session for the Monroe County Board of Commissioners. It is November 6th, and all three commissioners are here and present in the Nat U Hill Room. We have two items from planning, and both of them Ms. Crecelius is handling. So we'll start with ordinance 2024-51.
Good morning, commissioners. So on my screen, I have this first request for you. This is a request to amend the Cedar Chase PUD outline plan. This would be Amendment 1 if approved. So we are looking at an amendment to the ordinance. We are located in Van Buren Township. This PUD that was created originally by the city of Bloomington. So this area, it encompasses like 5 or 6 different subdivision phases currently. So the request started with planning and zoning enforcement action. So back in May, planning staff found a property that had built without permits, and unfortunately it was also within an area that is restricted by the PUD. So within the PUD ordinance, there is a 50-foot PUD buffer that is referenced. So the Cedar Chase was created in 1995 by the city of Bloomington. It was developed in those phases I mentioned, and there's multiple kind of environmental constraints on the properties, and that's reflected on the plats. We see them as special conservancy easements. There's multiple large karsts in some areas, but through the negotiation of adopting this PUD in 94, there were some concerns about buffering from the property to the north, which was and is still currently kind of agricultural use. It's now looks less agricultural and does have a single family residential on it, but there were some concerns. So from the meeting minutes, they added on a condition to have a 50-foot buffer to preserve existing vegetation, buffer against encroachment towards the northern property, discourage trespassing from the subdivision onto the northern property. So we see that on the plat and within the PUD ordinance as a PUD buffer. It goes by a few different terms, and it only applies to the properties located on the northern side. So this screenshot on the screen right now, this is just one section of the PUD. It continues on farther east and farther west, but this PUD buffer applies to all of these northern properties. So we're specifically looking at, it started with lot 15, which is kind of the aqua colored site. We have, so the enforcement issue here, it's pretty much that 50-foot buffer is the full extent of their backyard. So in 2022, the property owner applied for a building permit to add a sunroom addition. The zoning inspector at the time, communicated there was a PUD buffer. They referred them to a planner. They communicated there that they could go through this outline plan amendment to amend it and be able to do their addition. Through lack of communication, the permit was just stopped. And then just, this year we see that based on updated aerial imagery that the addition was added as the building permit had originally shown. So following up with that, the property owner has, worked with us from day one upon receiving their enforcement letter to try to come into compliance with the ordinance. So through this process, we have so the plan review committee heard this in August. They had kind of a general discussion regarding enforcement of the zoning ordinance and did not pass along a recommendation. And then the Plan Commission heard this in September and October of this year. In September, the Plan Commission, kind of directed staff to work with the petitioner to try to include some of the other properties that are affected by this. Because there's a lot of different subdivision phases, we have identified the one subdivision phase that the petitioners is platted within, and we've identified 6 other properties in this same subdivision phase that we've now included into the petition. And I'm going to try to find that photo real quick again that I had on screen earlier. So this is just one of quite a few properties. So it's 7 properties total that are within this petition. There are other properties along the northern boundary that are still going to be subject to this PUD buffer if approved. But for these 7 properties, planning staff has notified the property owners that Plan Commission, was having a hearing on removing or reducing the buffer. And we also notified those properties, adjacent properties per Indiana State Code, and again, advertised the preliminary hearing date for the Plan Commission. To date, I have received no remonstrance and 1 letter of support. So I have not been contacted by any of the other property owners that would be involved that we added in. So staff recommended the Plan Commission that we just remove the buffer from these 7 properties, because within the subdivision plat, there are still plenty of other protections in place for the environmental features, and there's still an underlying 25-foot rear yard setback. So to jump up to the zoning ordinance that we are recommending. So the ordinance states that the development plan would be amended to authorize the following changes: remove the 50-foot buffer from lots 15 through 21 as shown in the Cedar Chase subdivision phase 2 section 2 final plat. And then we state, in lieu of the 50-foot PUD buffer, the lots impacted shall now follow the 25-foot rear setback requirements for structures. So they'd gain approximately 25 feet. And so the properties that do not have any expansions or additions, they would have the ability to do a porch or an addition. And the property that this started with, 4132 West Red Rock Road, their addition would then become compliant, and that addition would be able to remain in place. Working with the petitioner's representative, they do have a little bit of restrictions about having a preliminary hearing, just dates wise. So I wanted to go ahead and include that, in your agenda request form, the 90 days that we have for the commissioners to hear this as a preliminary hearing gives us until January 22nd of 2025. The petitioner's representative would like to request a hearing on November 27th. I threw out multiple dates in November and the beginning of December, of which they had multiple conflicts. So November 27th was one that they could possibly work. Do you all have any questions about this or anything I can research and bring to you next time?
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. Crecelius. I'm just going to insert a little bit of information that isn't part of this petition, but came to light during the Plan Commission process, and that is that the person ended up building out toward the back of their house due to having a disabled child in their residence, and they did go to a contractor who said, oh no, it's fine, and no permit. And yeah, so I don't blame, when you read this, you think, oh, this owner is just trying to, get away with something. But, he did the right things. He, and he has an attorney, he's dealing with that separately. So with that one property now having to change that buffer, my contention was, well, why not do it for all the neighbors on that one line? Because if it's not an issue, and Ms. Latonia has chimed in and said, no, it's really not an issue of drainage, then why not do this for everyone? Give them a little bit more space. So that's how all of this came about, and I just wanted to share those 2 things with you. So that's why it's more than one property, and yeah. So Commissioner Jones?
Thank you. I think that's rather important to know. I was all set to say, whenever someone decides to flagrantly break the law, do we change the law to make it okay?
Yeah.
But this does sound like a kind of reasonable situation. And I'm sure that this is, I take it contractors are not required to make sure that there are permits ever.
they're licensed and insured, and so they should be getting those permits. That's their job, and so that's why they're
Okay.
licensed and insured. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they should be. I don't think there's a legal consequence. It's civil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, when I read through this, since since it was available on Monday, which was really nice, that what they did was, originally there was like a patio there, and then they just built it up over the top of the patio, and so it was already an impervious surface in my mind, so it didn't change that, but I appreciate the additional explanation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, roofs are also impervious, but they're different in terms
Right.
of how
The
water.
runoff and,
Yeah.
but
But they
you
can
can
be
have
directed
eaves
more,
and-
yes,
yeah.
exactly.
People
Yep.
can have rain barrels. And,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. All right, so any questions for Ms. Crecelius on this item?
No.
So it'll come back on the November 27th then? Is that what we're hearing? She said that was the petitioner's or the petitioner's representative's request.
Yeah, let me look. Are we meeting that?
That's the day before Thanksgiving. No, wait, is it? Yes. It's the day before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Will we be here? Miss Purdy, will we be here?
You. Generally, it's pretty low staffing day.
Yeah.
It's the 27th, right?
That's what Ms.
Okay.
Crecelius indicated they
Okay.
wanted.
We do have a meeting that day. I'm fine with hearing that if other folks are okay with that. Okay, all right, so yeah, so November 27th it is. Okay? All right.
Wonderful, thank you.
Great, and the next item is ordinance 2024-52. This is also a outline plan amendment. This is amendment number 2. This is Westgate on 3rd.
Yes. Okay, so I know you just heard this year. So as they said last time that they would continue working on their requests regarding the elevators. So Mr. Huckman has come back. They've done quite a bit of kind of work and research into this. So the 3 changes under this PUD request to Westgate on 3rd PUD are 1, remove the 33,000 square feet of commercial use space from buildings 1 through 3. So on screen, it's the northernmost 3 buildings. So these are the only 3 elevators that are required to have, the 3 buildings that are required to have the elevators. The second point is remove the requirement for the 3 elevators. And the third point is add 42 residential units across these 3 buildings. So it'd be integrated into phases 7 and 8 of their phasing plan. They currently have building permits for all structures except these 3. They're currently at a point where they're on a bit of a deadline to kind of, get these buildings going, I think. And I'll touch base on that again. So because this is a longer packet for this petition, just quickly, Exhibit A is the proposed ordinance by planning staff and the outline plan actual text with the approved text in it. Exhibit B is their proposed written commitment, which I'll touch on. And then a C is the Plan Commission staff report, which does have the original red line version of their proposed plan. So the master outline plan we would be looking at is under Exhibit A with the ordinance. So, they've done a lot of discussion, and I know that I think they came to your one of your office meeting times and kind of hashed out some of these ideas originally. So the original kind of this stems from issues with having the elevators required, and that is written specifically into the PUD ordinance. So out of this process, we have learned that under building code, elevators would not be required for these 3 buildings. So all the buildings on Westgate are capped at 3 stories in height. 3 stories in the building, Indiana State Building Code, they would not require an elevator unless for very specific uses like a shopping mall or a healthcare center. things like that. The issue came from the building layout. So these 3 buildings are supposed to have that commercial space with a few different, uses, things permitted, office space, cafe, certain things like that. That would be amenable. Having the elevators required created an interior, a footprint that just was not working out well for them. So they were going to have an interior hallway. So there's a few different footprints that are within the Exhibit C, the staff report packet, that shows these kind of awkward layouts for commercial spaces. So through that from last time as well, and this process, some points that kept coming up was, what's the building code? Staff research, look into that. Some things were about, first floor commercial. What is the availability? What are the issues in Monroe County? The point that, first floor commercial and that it, appears to be common and commonly not leased came up multiple times. So they did some research into that, provided some information that, and opinions that basically advised them that they're going to have difficulty renting these spaces. So through Plan Review Committee and Plan Commission, they've come up with first floor residential units that would be barrier-free and would be a type B under the Americans with Disabilities Act, meaning that they are able to be adapted to be fully accessible. So they just have to be barrier-free and then have certain things where they can be adapted, like adding in handlebars or counters. You can remove the kickboard so that they're accessible by wheelchair, certain things like that. So they're committing that those apartments would be able to be adapted and they'd be barrier-free. They have also proposed of having making some of these units available for workforce housing. And through that, we have a proposed written commitment, which is that Exhibit B within the packet. So they are offering this commitment for, workforce housing. It would be available for a period of 25 years from the effective date. It would be for certain units in buildings 1 through 3. So it'd be 25% of the units in buildings 1 through 3. And it would kind of follow, let's see, the U.S. Department of Housing, Urban and Development requirements for households, individuals, families with annual incomes between 80% and 120% of the median income for Monroe County. And then the rental rates would be set by the levels of affordability based on the HUD guidelines. And then they state that the number of units within buildings 1 through 3 of the project reserved for workforce housing shall decline on a following schedule. So it'd be over 25 years that the number of units reserved and available would kind of start to decrease, so that after 25 years, they would not be, accepting any new leases that would have that. They wouldn't be offering any new leases that had that affordability built in. So that is Exhibit B. Something else that they have added in, so the current proposed outline plan amendment, they have added community gardens back into the outline plan. They're still working on the design. I've seen 2 different design drafts just as of last week, where they were just running into some design issues based on where a water spigot could be, but the petitioner, Mr. Huffman, wanted to acknowledge that he heard your feedback last time on that, and they're adding it back in. So they're now kind of have a designated area for community gardens over by the dog park. So not too far. The pickleball courts and the outdoor exercise equipment that you approved under the last amendment is still in effect. So community gardens is back into play. I believe I have covered the highlighted points of this amendment request, and based on their building schedule and winter coming up, this petition, they also have a requested hearing date. So they are, if possible, they would like to be heard on November 13th, which would be next week. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Ms. Crecilius, questions, Commissioner Githens?
I'm Not sure which of these should go to Ms. Crecilius and which should go to the developers, but I do have a list of questions.
Well, I think if you give her the questions, if she can't answer them, she will pass them on to the developer, who will bring the answers with them when we meet.
Okay,
Is that fair?
sure. So have they updated the conservancy area around the karst that we all know is there and that they have acknowledged is there? Do you know whether or not they've got a 50-foot buffer?
They have not changed the conservancy of the karst. That is being maintained as approved by stormwater. So there's no change to that. There's never been a proposed change.
And that they could be made into ADA apartments on the first floor. That's too vague for me. First of all, I'd like to see some that are already made fully accessible, and sometimes that means also widened doorways, that it's very hard to change the doorways after something's been built. But they did not specify which, the number of bedrooms that are going to be in these ADA compliant units. They did not specify how many of the ADA apartments would fall under the workforce category in terms of the cost for those, and how long those would be preserved under the workforce housing, because as you noted, there's a kind of a dribbling off of that in terms of the numbers. They also, if you're going to put in ADA compliant stuff, we need full handicap parking that would go with that, and how does that impact the number of parking spaces that they have to have. There also seemed to be a big change in the number of studio and 3-bedroom units that are being proposed. And again, I don't know how many of those are going to be as part of the workforce, how many are dedicated to that. And I would really like to see some units that are preserved also for Section 8 housing. But that's me. That's a separate issue.
I will write down your questions. I do think I have a couple of points I can include. Your question about, can they just be fully created ADA? I will take that to them. The specific doorways comment, I know that is one thing that has to be able, that's not something that can be converted, right? So that is required under the adaptability. It's other things, smaller things that I read under the ADA's guidelines about the type B requirement that could be adapted. So door frames, they have to meet wheelchair accessibility requirements. Let's see what else. The parking already exceeds ADA requirements. So parking is not changing because they were already exceeding just the number of spaces, but also the available of ADA and accessible spaces already exceeds it. So that is good. I will take the rest of your questions to the petitioner.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, you're looking for a breakdown not by phasing or not by building, but you would like to see a total number of studio 1, 2, 3 bedroom from what was originally proposed to what's proposed now, and then noting on what's proposed now which ones of those become workforce and ADA
and ADA
and
right.
or ADA. Okay.
Yeah.
Does that help, Ann?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Yeah,
clarifying.
they can bring that.
Yeah, and I must say, I appreciate the fact that they did their homework on the non-occupancy stuff with the commercial spaces.
Yeah, we know there's a lot of vacancies all around town, yeah, it's just funny. And I hate the term workforce because we're all in the workforce unless we're retired or too young. But this is a plan that relates to income
Right.
and then matching a rent to the income of the renter. So Section 8 is a whole different animal.
Right.
And, it's possible to do tax abatements with that. And, and I think that's something that if Ms. Crecilius is willing to propose that to the petitioner, that they might be interested, and we can get that kind of paperwork done with the help of our great legal staff. Commissioner Jones. comments or questions?
Yeah, I appreciated the reemergence of the community gardens and the fact that you have made it a more possible endeavor. I also appreciated the fact that workforce was somewhat defined. And I'm assuming that if someone rents at workforce rates, that rent wouldn't change until that lease was over. I mean, I don't want people moving into workforce housing and then 10 years later having their rent suddenly shoot up. I mean, beyond workforce
Absolutely.
situation.
I will clarify that. My understanding is that it's by unit that would be available. So that just if the unit was vacant, then that it would change. But that's a great point, and I will clarify with Mr. Huffman.
It's going to have to be in the leases, right?
Yeah,
The individual
yeah.
leases, yeah.
That while you're there, if you still fall within that income range.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Great. So it looks like petitioner would like this heard next week. My colleagues, I'm not going to be here. My colleagues, okay with that? Yeah. Okay. We're good with November 13th for hearing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Great. We have at least one more item for our work session. Mr. Cockrell.
Yes, and this should be fairly quick. When you approve the contract for the purchase of real estate for with Logan Land Development, we sent it to them. They came back with one amendment, and that is in the appropriate zoning paragraph. It has said that they would have gotten us their rezone plan by November 1st, 2024. Given the fact that we didn't get it, he didn't get it, they didn't approve it till end of October, they're asking, and they're amending that for December 1st, 2024 to give them a month to get that to you. If you are okay with that, if you could make a motion that authorizes the president to initial that change, we'll get it finalized.
Yes, I move that we authorize Board of Commissioner President Julie Thomas to initial the change to the contract with is it Logan Land LLC? Is that right? Changing the required date for application for PUD from November 1st, 2024 to December 1st, 2024.
Second.
And I just clarify that basically what they're doing is giving the Board of Commissioners their plan, not beginning the actual planning
Right,
process.
okay, thank you.
So just
To provide the plan to the board. Got it. Yeah. Okay, great. Great. We have a motion. We have a second. Any public comment on this item? You could raise your hand on Teams. Otherwise, it's just us in the Nat U Hill room. All right. Excellent. Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the amendment to the purchase agreement signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 3-0. Anything else? Staff, anything else? No? Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.